Essentially, you lived 35 years on the pages of comic books. Has it been the ride you expected it to be?
No, but on the other hand, I've achieved, what I set out to do. I had a master plan when before I started doing comics. And amazingly, it's worked out. Unfortunately, part of my master plan wasn't to become a millionaire. But what I wanted to do was, when I was a kid, I read comics for a while, and then I got sick of them. I mean, they're kid stuff, the superhero stuff. So I wanted to, I took a second look at them after I met Robert Crumb, this famous artist.
In 1962.
Yeah, right. And I saw what he was doing, and I thought, well, I was wrong about comics. I mean, you can use any word in the dictionary. You can use a zillion different kinds of illustration styles. There's no reason why comics can't be as good as any other art form.
And in fact, that's sort of the debate right now, that is it art, is it literature? And the answer seems increasingly to be yes, it is.
Well, I mean, even if you don't like the stuff you've seen so far, a comics writer's got to, can draw from any word in a dictionary. So, he's got the same words. We're working with the same words as Shakespeare. So somebody sometime will come along to make you happy,
Speaking of making people happy, a record crowd showed up at Penn State for the graphic novels Comic as Art, History, and Literature that was held here at Penn State. What does it mean to you for a major institution like Penn State to recognize the work of graphic novelists like yourself?
Oh, well, I mean, I'm always looking for legitimacy and, as well as money, of course. But it means a lot. When that kind of notoriety and publicity. I mean, comics themselves are, still embattled, as well as, people who do them. And so, people say, oh, he was at Penn State, how bad could he be,
You mentioned Robert Crumb just a moment ago, and you met through your mutual interest in jazz records back in 1962. Crumb, who is probably one of the best-known cartoonists, said, "You were one of the most important and interesting cartoonists to emerge in the last 30 years." Tell us a little bit about your relationship to date. I mean, you had an interesting friendship, and he encouraged you to go out on your own and begin developing your own comics, which became American Splendor.
Yeah, it was a tremendous stroke of luck that I was able to meet him. What happened was, how I got to meet him, I'm a few years older than he is. So, I was already in the neighborhood he moved into, and I was a record collector. And and then a guy who was a mutual friend of mine and a guy named Marty Pauls, who had just gotten an apartment around the corner from where I lived, told me that there was another guy that was going to be moving in, and that both Pauls and this guy were record collectors. So I'm thinking, more guys to prey on, because, I was heavily into trading and stuff like that. And I was really overjoyed because they liked 78s, and I was an LP collector primarily. So, when I found 78s, a lot of times I would just trade them, the guys for LPs. And these guys were, the opposite. They didn't want LPs. They considered them, like impure or something like that. So, anyway, I went around the corner and I met Crumb and I met his roommate, and it was a very nice discussion, and they're both really nice guys. And most of it had to do with jazz records and jazz collecting. And, you know, sort of like just before I left, Marty Paul says, hey, Harvey, wait a minute. Like, you really ought to take a look at the comics that Robert does, you know, 'cause he's really, you know, something special. So I said, yeah, okay, you know, and I wasn't looking for anything. And he shows me this thing. This was in 1972. That was like a comic book novel, you know.
Way ahead of its time.
Yeah, it was called the Big Yum Yum Book. If it came out today, it'd be called a graphic novel. It was a satire, you know, and it was really, you know, very funny.
And you thought to yourself, I could do this myself?
Well, I thought to myself, I can see where comics have the, you know, this much larger potential than I realized. And, you know, maybe I can do something in there. I figured comics have got so far to go. There's so much that can be done in them that anybody that even tries to do anything different will make his mark in the history books, you know? Like maybe the so-and-so didn't discover America, but he got to, you know, close, you know, the Canary Islands or something. So, you know, I was like a guy who was like a kind of a class clown in school, and I was always trying to make jokes and tell stories until I mean, I even developed a repertoire of them that I would tell one person at a time, not 50 at one time, but one person at a time, so I would get 50 laughs. You know, I mean, you know, one, you know, anyway, so Crumb, yeah, you know, I stayed in touch with Crumb, and he went and he got himself a job at the American Greeting Corporation, and he just rose like a shot in there, you know, even though he had no formal training.
Keep on trucking
he just,
is his.
Yeah, all that. He just went up, you know, right to being just about their top guy. And even though he was like really, really a shy, introverted guy, people in the neighborhood would come around and look at his artwork and say, hey, boy, this guy's really good, you know, and everybody try and be his friend. And, you know, he actually had his first date with the girl who he later married in Cleveland, you know, and stuff like that. It was really important.
Well, actually, that's a good segue to the movie that was actually made about your comic book series, American Splendor. And in it, there's a wonderful clip of your first meeting Joyce. Joyce is a big fan of your American Splendor comic book series, and you arranged to meet. She knew you only from the pictures she had seen and wasn't quite sure to what extent you matched the pictures that were in the comic book. And so we have a scene from that movie when you first meet. Let's have a look.
Right.
Come here. Harvey, which way is the bathroom?
To the kitchen on the right. Joyce. Hey. Joyce, what's wrong? What is it?
Oh, I don't know. I think that yuppie food did me in.
I feel terrible. Let me at least do something for you. Can I make you something? Hey, how about some chamomile tea?
Chamomile tea?
Yeah.
What's a guy like you doing with that? I thought you drank soda pop for breakfast.
I don't know, you know, I just noticed you drank a lot of it when we start talking on the phone. You know, the girl at the food co-op, she picked me out all kinds of this herbal stuff. Man, one of these is good for stomach aches. Here, Grandma Bear's tummy mitt or something, I think. Hey, you still there?
Harvey, I think we should skip the whole courtship thing and just get married.
Is that really?
Yeah, that's the way it happened. I mean, you know, I cleaned up after, and you know, and that plus the fact that I had, you know, gotten a tea. She said that, you know, that.
That set her heart
Yeah.
aflutter.
I'm used to, you know, like getting married and at the drop of a hat. You know, I've been married 3
Well,
times.
it's worked out. She's still with you.
Yeah, yeah, amazingly, yeah.
No, unlike Robert Crumb, though, you don't illustrate your own comics.
Right.
And that was an issue, something interesting that came up with Joyce when she was recording you on the telephone. You know, do you really look like the pictures in the comic
Yeah.
book? So I'm wondering, of all of the illustrators that you worked with, did you have a favorite or one you thought depicted you as closely to the way you'd imagined it yourself?
Well, there was one guy. I'm not saying this guy was the best illustrator I ever worked with, but he was very good. But one guy, his name is Jerry Shamry, used to take a photograph for like every panel in the story I would give him to illustrate. And, you know, he would have me, you know, pose, you know, like in mid-step and everything like that. So I'd be balancing while he got the shot and everything. And Jerry, you know, used to, then he would trace those photographs. And so he's the guy that, you know, probably came the closest to making me look like what I actually looked like. And Crumb said that he used Shamry's drawings of me as references. So
what did you think of Giamatti's portrayal of you?
Oh, well, Paul's a terrific actor. I mean, I've had a couple of huge, you know, strokes of luck. One of them was meeting Crumb and that leading to my doing American Splendor. And
The comic
other
book series.
Yeah, and the other one was this movie, you know, which really just opened up everything to me. I was about to retire. I really didn't have enough money to live on, you know, with the pension. I mean, I was just like, it was 37 years I was with the VA hospital.
Working as a file clerk.
Yeah, you know, for the federal government. And I figured, you know, it's time to, I might as well go, you know. But I didn't think I would, you know, be able to make it as well as I have. I mean, my stuff never sold. It got, you know, a lot of critical praise, but it never sold.
What impact did the movie have on the sales?
It had a tremendous impact. They made a companion book, which they marketed. It wasn't one of those two. It was.
But here is one that does deal a little bit with the movie,
right.
American
We're squeezing
Splendor.
everything we could out of the movie. But they made a companion book, and the companion book sold, you know, like well over 50,000 copies. I don't know. I'm still getting royalties for it. It's still moving, I guess. And and you know, that gave me like legitimacy in the eyes of publishers. And so I, you know, signed an agreement with Random House to do 4 more books. So I've, 3 of them have come out already. I don't really know how well they've sold because all 4 have to come out. The 4th one's about to come out before I get royalties from them. But they did offer me a contract to do 2 more. So I guess it's all right.
In fact, you've really branched out since American Splendor, which we should mention was Doubleday's first comic book they ever published. But you have gone on to write The Quitter for CD Comics in 2005, and Ego and Hubris, the Michael Malice story, which a lot of people online are talking about. In fact, a lot of people suggest that Michael Malice is really your alter ego.
Michael Malice is a real person. And as a lot of people, if you look enough on the internet, you know, a lot of people have identified him. They know who he is. He's the guy who, you know, was the co-producer of Overheard in New York City, which was a program that was pretty popular. And it was, I guess people would send him in, you know, little snatches of, you know, conversation that they heard in the street, you know, absurd stuff and things like that. And they would just, you know, I guess, broadcast them or show them on the air. And, you know, people would you know, break up over him, you know. And so the guy, he's no longer with the show, but he was doing that for a while.
What was it about him that made you think it would make an interesting comic strip?
Well, originally, when I met Michael, he came to me because he thought I could help him with his writing career. You know, we had mutual friends, and so he came over and, you know, we talked. And I didn't, at that time, I didn't realize what kind of guy he was because, I mean, like all this hostility and stuff that he had, you know, within him didn't come out, you know, right away, or it wasn't directed at me. We had a very pleasant conversation, and I did wind up writing a story about him before I did the book about him and his affection for tropical fish, and how during the blackout in 2003 in New York, he tried unsuccessfully to, well, I guess he saved a couple of his fish, but, you know, most of his fish died, you know, because of the electricity, you know, screwed up the tank they were in and stuff. So, you know, I said, well, you know, I was interested in Michael also because he's a Russian Jew.
And you're the son of Russian immigrants.
I'm the son of, I'm the son of, well, it actually was Russia when they were born. It later became Poland. But I'm from a Yiddish-speaking background, and Russian Jews and the Yiddish-speaking Jews don't mix. They don't get along. It's like two different, you know, cultures. You know, Russian Jews speak Russian. They don't speak Yiddish. They probably, most of them don't even understand Yiddish or anything. And so I was interested, you know, in him telling me about his background. I thought I'd do a piece, you know, maybe contrasting the two, you know, groups of people. And then he sent, so, you know, I said, if you want to, you know, send me some stuff and I'll do something about it. And so he sent me this, you know, big sheaf of paper, and it detailed all of these crazy fights and stuff like that he got into with everybody.
Well, what do you make of the fact that people think that there's something of you in him? Does that?
Well, I think maybe part of it is that I'm known for writing autobiographical stuff. So no matter who I wrote about, they would probably think, you know, it was just, you know, it was, you know, me only in, you know, disguise or something.
What do you make of, and we're running out of time, but what do you make of the idea that some have said that you are the Mark Twain of comic books?
I'll take it. I don't know. I mean, you know, it remains to be seen, but I'll take it.
And as far as the potential for comic books, we haven't even begun to see their potential.
Well, yeah, assuming that that there isn't a fall off in readership, comic books are still kind of imperiled. What's going to save them? If they get saved, it's going to be so-called graphic novels, which are fat comic books, you know, trade paperbacks, and even now hardbound books that they put in legitimate bookstores. Comic book stores are dying all over the place, and they're going to have to, you know, sell them in like Barnes and Noble and Borders and stuff like that for them to make it.
And on that note, we're out of time. Thank you, Harvey Pekar, for talking with us.
It's a pleasure. Thanks. Thanks for having me.
The comic book has grown up. Once it was only on newsstands, but now it can be found almost everywhere. even in libraries and museums. At the Petit Paterno Library on the University Park campus, graphic novels that have earned their place in today's popular culture are on exhibit. But let's back up our story to the beginning. What is a graphic novel?
The graphic novel is, simply put, a story told in pictures and words. That's really how you would define a graphic novel, although that sounds oversimplified.
There are some amazing biographies in graphic novel form, and nonfiction, and political commentaries, and satire, and it just has really expanded that notion of Archie and Veronica, or of the superheroes, and it's really taken us to places, I think, where we need to go as adults, what we hunger for in literature.
Stories can be told in this compelling way with pictures and words, but about more complex subjects than comics had previously tackled.
This is a good example of a graphic novel. In addition to having, I think, all of the typical characteristics of a graphic novel, this was a particularly successful example. In this situation, the character's had an accident, and so he's lying on the road, and his nose is starting to bleed. And then there's an unusual transition, where suddenly we're just sort of following a little bird out in the woods. And the little bird, just in a few pages, travels through 3 different time periods. So here we are in the Civil War era, in a hospital tent. In 1893, during the Chicago Exposition, and then finally a little clinic. And then we're back with the character who's sitting and waiting to see the doctor at the clinic. The page layout with Chris Ware is usually very complex. He's very meticulous about how he uses the space on the page. And he's creative about it too, so that we have to be creative in reading it, trying to decide what the sequence is that we want to take the images in.
The social protest of the 1960s fueled the beginnings of the graphic novel. Underground cartoonists took the treasured entertainment form of comics and stretched its limits.
We're looking at a book called A Contract with God, which was written and illustrated by Will Eisner in 1978. It is considered by many to be the first graphic novel, the first official graphic novel. He's the one that said that it was the underground cartoonists who are responsible for the literary maturity of comics. He said that they moved comics into a field of talking about real issues in life and creating really important art. This book is called The Big Yum Yum Book, and it was created by Robert Crumb. He is a monumental figure in the field of comics. He created this book in the mid-70s, 1975. It's his first graphic novel. He did it when he was 19 years old. He's known as the creator of Mr. Natural, Angel Food McSpade, Fritz the Cat, many other characters. So he's a key pivotal figure in the field of comics.
No story is too big or too small for the graphic novel. Themes range from stories about everyday life on the streets of Cleveland, the true retelling of Texas history, the Iranian Revolution, the Arab-Israeli conflict, and Elvis.
This is the work of Phoebe Glockner, who's a hugely important female artist working in the field of graphic novels today. Her work is really intense and autobiographical and really speaks to what it's like to be a woman in America today. And her 2002 novel, Diary of a Teenage Girl, is a combination of prose and poetry and art and comics, and it's a really innovative graphic novel. This is the cover of American Splendor #4, written by Harvey Pekar, and many of the stories in this comic book were drawn by Robert Crumb. Robert Crumb met Harvey Pekar in 1962 in Cleveland, Ohio. Robert Crumb was working at American Greeting Card Company when he met Harvey Pekar, and they became friends through their mutual love and collecting of records, of jazz and blues records. And so Crumb started illustrating Harvey Pekar's stories, and the rest, as they say, is history. And Harvey went on to bigger fame when American Splendor was made into a movie in 2003, starring Paul Giamatti. So once again, comics have had a huge influence on our culture.
You should try believing in something bigger than yourself. It might cheer you up.
What, do we seem depressed?
The market is out there, and the collective publishing representation knows that the graphic novel is really now a mainstream force. The films that are coming out of graphic novels too show that there's an audience even beyond those that read the graphic novels, but that format is intriguing to people.
This is the work of Art Spiegelman. He is one of the world's best known graphic artists. Mouse was a story that he wrote in pictures and in words about his parents surviving the Holocaust. They were both in concentration camps, and he tells the story of how they survived. So Art Spiegelman is somebody that is telling really important historical events using pictures and words, using a comic book format. And Mouse won a Pulitzer Prize, a special Pulitzer Prize in 1992. It's the only comic work that has won a Pulitzer Prize.
The graphic novel no longer lingers in the shadows of the underground. It's popular. It's mainstream. It remains true to character, telling stories of today through the power of words and pictures.